overthrow of this government than just talking about it. These Weatherman people were actually randomly bombing and intended to kill people. At that point, pressure came all the way from the White House to catch these people. It was very, very high pressure.
When this explosion happened, a group of us disappeared from sight, and that was really the official beginning of what came to be called the Weather Underground.
Anyone who does have any information on where these people are located should immediately contact the FBI.
I cut my hair. That was hard for me. I had long hair down to my waist for a lot of years. And so preparing to go underground, I cut my hair off. And I went back to say goodbye to my family on the farm. My family's a very strong, cohesive, extended Jewish family. And they were just hurt and confused. I remember feeling that unless I really made a break with my family, I wasn't going to be able to be free to do what I'd have to do as a revolutionary. There was a lot of hurt to my family, my parents, but I was going to do it. I just wasn't going to let anything hold me back.
I knew we were going underground, but of course I didn't know how precipitously it would happen. My parents weren't political. They didn't have any way in which to put that into a framework. But I took a last trip to visit them, and I didn't want to scare them more than they were already worried, but I did want them to think back and remember what I said, that I didn't want to hurt them and that I loved them. So I, have a vivid memory of saying goodbye to them at the airport and walking away and turning around and looking at them waving at me and knowing that I wasn't going to see them again.
Shortly after the townhouse explosion, the leaders of the Weather Underground gathered at a house on the coast of Northern California to figure out what had gone wrong.
We took a deep, deep breath and a big step back from the precipice. There was a huge debate about what had happened, and the conclusion that the majority of us came to was that a terrible error had been made, that it was definitely wrong to unleash indiscriminate violence against ordinary people, that was actually terrorism.
I wasn't in the leadership. I wasn't making decisions, but I still feel responsible because I didn't say at any point, wait a second. If we're going to talk about waging war against, bring the war home, wage war against in the belly of the mother country and all that stuff, we better know what we're talking about before we start actually taking actions. And, I regret that to this day.
We were very careful from the moment of the townhouse on to be sure we weren't going to hurt anybody. And we never did hurt anybody. Whenever we put a bomb in a public space, we had figured out all kinds of ways to put checks and balances on the thing, and also to get people away from it. And we were remarkably successful.
Our goal was to not hurt any people, and a lot of work went into that. But we wanted to pick targets that show to the public who was responsible for what was really going on.
During the early 1970s, there was a strong radical prison movement in the United States.
We are men. We are not beasts, and we do not intend to be driven or beaten as such. The entire prison populace has set forth to change forever the ruthless brutalization and disregard for the lives of the prisoners here and throughout the United States.
One of the prison movement's leaders was George Jackson. He had become famous after publishing a bestseller. In August 1971, Jackson was killed by guards at San Quentin during an escape attempt.
Our witnesses say that George Jackson was shot in the leg, apparently, went down, got up, and was running in a cross position, and was shot again.
They say that George ran for the gate with a gun in his hand. That sounds a lot like...
Let's say anything.
We were not unprepared for this crisis. We'd been watching the prison scene closely, after all, and had often discussed potential targets. The State Corrections Department had a suite of offices in the Ferry Building, at the edge of downtown in San Francisco. The gray prison bureaucracy was usually both anonymous and unaccountable. Flushing them out and humiliating them in their fancy digs was a proper step towards redress. We started moving people and supplies into a motel on Lombard Street on Thursday evening. Arrivals and departures from the motel were tightly rationed. We didn't want it to look like a dope dealer had set up shop. Stanley and I started working on the wiring that first night. Zeke was holed up somewhere, working on the communique, which we were all dying to see. We had the thing pretty well built, and were testing the connections by mid-morning Friday. Nick slid the box into the airline bag, then zippered the bag shut and hung it on my shoulder. Hugs and kisses all around and out the door into the bright California sun. All of the safeguards in the world could not take the fear out of the Enterprise from this point on. Up the parcel goes, my hands to his, into the hole. One last moment of serious vulnerability. Stepping back into the main hall. All clear. Leave in opposite directions. Don't walk too fast. It's 2:30. 9.5 hours to go. We did it.
San Francisco Chronicle, August 28, 1971. The call from the young man was made to Helen Garrick, switchboard operator at the Chronicle. She kept notes on what the caller said. Quote, "There's a bomb in the Ferry Building. It will go off in 15 minutes. They're doing this in defense of Jackson. Be sure to have the Harbor Police and the City Police clear the area."
The underground Weatherman organization claimed responsibility for the San Francisco and Sacramento bombings, saying they were, I quote, "in outraged response to the assassination of Soledad brother George Jackson."
The bombings came just hours before Jackson's funeral at this Episcopal church in the poor black section of Oakland.
To the Jackson family.
This is the 12th communication from the Weather Underground. The history of black people in this country has been one of passionate resistance to the slave masters. All too often, they have had to wage that fight alone. Black and brown people inside the jails are doing all they can. Must they fight alone even now? White people on the outside have a deep responsibility to enter the battle at every level. We view our action as simply a first expression of our love and respect for George Jackson and the warriors of San Quentin.
The Associated Press in Washington today received a 5-page typewritten letter in which an organization calling itself the Weather Underground said it had bombed the Capitol yesterday. The letter said, among other things, we have attacked the Capitol because it is a monument to U.S. domination over the planet.
We didn't do it, but we dug it. The people who did the Capitol bombing were the Weather Underground. They bombed the Capitol to bring a smile and a wink to all the kids who hate the American government.
There are sick minds, apparently, in this country who think that violence can be used to bring about social reform or to change national policy. It clearly can't, and moreover, these kinds of insane efforts hurt, not help.
When Weather first went underground in '70, the conventional wisdom that we would be rounded up within a year. You don't remember the 50s. I grew up in the 50s. Every TV program, the police or the FBI always got their man. In fact, I think there was a movie code. You couldn't show people getting away with crime. So there was a psyche in the population that it was impossible to defy the FBI. Everybody on the left said, no, this is only going to last for a few months.
Underground is sort of a state of information control rather than a place. It means having a lot of control about who knows what, about who you are and where you are. So you don't have a phone in the house. All phone calls are made from phone booths. I didn't hang out in places where a lot of people from my past were going to recognize me.
It's a parallel universe. I mean, the number of times that I would run into people who should have recognized me and didn't was astronomical. Because how would they recognize you? You were underground. So you couldn't possibly be walking out of that theater because you're not here. You're invisible.
There was a leadership group, which was the Weather Bureau, that circulated around the country and would visit various collectives. I was in one of the groups, so they would visit us occasionally. I didn't know exactly what was happening in all the other areas of the country because we had a need-to-know principle, right? If you didn't have to know it, you didn't know it, and you didn't ask.
Tonight, American and South Vietnamese units will attack the headquarters for the entire communist military operation in South Vietnam.
As President Nixon continued to widen the Vietnam War, American society grew more and more polarized. For a time, the Weather Underground seemed to have its finger on the pulse of the growing counterculture. For many young people, the Weather Underground had become larger-than-life figures, outlaws in the tradition of Bonnie and Clyde or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Their successful actions only added to the mystique.
I've probably pushed my nervous system as much as any human being living. I've taken LSD over 500 times.
One of the group's most high-profile actions was helping the counterculture hero Timothy Leary escape from a California prison.
I think I'm the strongest, sanest person around.
Leary was serving a 10-year prison sentence for possession of several joints. The Weather Underground was paid $20,000 for the job.
This group, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, do you know who they are? They gave us a certain amount of money to break Leary out of jail and get him out of the country. They were a drug group, mainly LSD, that had Leary as their figurehead. and they had a lot of money.